Okay, I'm going to take you through and show you how the BIOVIA Notebook works. So I'm just going to log on. And when you log into the Notebook, you come to your home page, and here you should see links to the most recent experiments that you've been working on, so that when you come in the morning you can open yesterday's experiment and add some new experimental data. So we just open an experiment to see what they look like before we go off and create some new experiments. We just click on the link, the experiment opens in a new tab, so you can have lots of experiments open in different tabs, your own experiments and your colleagues' experiments. And if we look down this experiment, we can see that it's made up of sections, and the different sections have different sorts of content. Here I've attached a file, here's some text, here's an image, here's a small Excel sheet, etc. So that's what experiments look like. So go back to the tab with my home page. We can open existing experiments, your own or other people's, but if you want to start a new experiment, we just click the big button in the middle. So click the new experiment button, and when you start a new experiment you have a choice. You can start with a blank experiment, very much like a paper lab notebook with a blank page, or you can start from a template where you already have sections in place. The structure of the experiment is already there. We'll talk about templates at the end. Now I'm just going to go with the simplest blank experiment. So click on the blank experiment button, and the new experiment is created, and it's created on our server, so nothing is being stored on your local machine. Everything is immediately sent up and stored on our server. So here is the new experiment, and you can see that it has a few sections in place already. The experiment has a unique experiment number, this 6-digit number, and these are handed out in blocks of 100 consecutive numbers, so like being given a lab book with 100 page numbers. And when you've used your block, you'll be given another block from the system. It knows who I am. It knows when I started the experiment, so these are filled in automatically. All experiments need a title. You don't need to fill this in now. You can close the experiment, open the experiment, work on the experiment, but you won't be able to sign it off as completed until you've added a title. So I'm just going to put in a quick title now. The more informative the title is, the better, of course, because when you're browsing through lists of experiments, it is the titles that you can see. Another section which needs to be filled out at some stage is all experiments must belong to at least one project. If I click in here, it lists the projects that I'm a member of. In fact, it lists ones I've used recently. If you don't see the project you want in that list, then click on all, and then it will show every project that you're a member of. I can choose one project, I could choose more than one project. Now what adding a project to an experiment does is it makes this experiment visible to the other members of the project. By adding the project, you are publicizing your experimental work. So you may not want to add that project until a little bit later, when you're happier for your colleagues to see the experiment. And by the way, the projects are set up in the administration tool, which is found up here at the right, here with the 3 blobs, and then the cloud administration. Okay, so we've already got one section here, a text section to add simple text to the experiment, but to add more data, to add other types of data, we're just going to add more sections as we need them from this toolbox down the left hand side. If the toolbox isn't open, then you just click on it to open it, and just open and close as you need them. And when you add a section, it will come in underneath the section that you have highlighted or are working on in the experiment. So if I click on this section, then I'm going to add new sections underneath here. So to add an image to this experiment, I'm going to add an image section. I can double click on the left here, or I can click on the plus, it doesn't matter, and the section is added. If I need to add an Excel sheet, I can add an Excel section. If I want to add some more text, I can add another text section. I can just keep on adding sections to the experiment, and the experiment gets longer and longer. And there's no limit. The software will not stop you adding sections. I think 20 and 30 to 30 sections is a good size of an experiment, though I have seen users with several hundred sections. So how do these sections work? There are some things which work with all of the section types. If you go to the right of the section, you can see this cogwheel here, and there you have cut, copy, paste and delete. So for example, I can go to that other experiment that I had open earlier, and maybe I'm using a similar blotting procedure. I can take this section from here, copy it, go back to the experiment I'm working on, to the cogwheel, paste underneath. The section comes in. Of course, I can now edit it and change it if things are slightly different in the experiment I'm now doing than the one I've copied from. You can copy in the same experiment, you can copy from your other experiments, and you can copy from your colleagues' experiments. Another thing that you can do with all of the section types is you can move them using these little arrows here at the right. So if you just change your mind where a section should be, or you added it in the wrong place accidentally, you can always move your sections around. And the last thing that you can do with all of the section types is you can put in a new title, so that you can make the header of the section match the content. So this is a simple text section. It's like any other simple word processor. You've got bold, italic, super subscripts, bullets. There are a few fonts, but this is a lab notebook, it's not desktop publishing. There are different font sizes if you need them. So you can type into here as you would in any word processor. All of this text which you see, we index. So later when we come and search for experiments, that search is using all of the content of the experiment. You can copy and paste into here using standard keyboard shortcuts, PC or Mac. You can also use the cut, copy, paste buttons up here at the top. The calendar button inserts the date and time, so it can be useful if you're doing a long experiment, a long procedure. You can just put in timestamps as you go through. And if you need to, then we also have symbols which can be inserted using this omega button, and click on the symbol that you wish. For example, I can add a mu if I needed to have some microliters or something. So simple text can be added to your experiment. Images. We can bring images into experiments in various ways. You can click the upload button and browse to an image file, and we support most image file formats. You can use a screen capture and grab part of the screen from another application. You can paste an image from the clipboard, or I can drag and drop an image. So I've got a folder open on my other screen with some images which I can drop across. So the image comes into the experiment. You can always download an image from an experiment from the download button here. You can download the displayed compressed image, or you can download the uncompressed original image file. Again, we can change the title of the section. If you click on the image itself, you can resize the image by dragging the corner. And also we have these simple annotation tools up here where you can add squares, text, lines, arrows, etc. So I can add an arrow, I can move it around, I can even move it here in the space next to the image, and I can also then grab the pointed end of the arrow and move that. Select an arrow or any annotation and you can change the color if you need to. We can add some text. And again, I can move that around. And of course, this text is indexed like all of the other text. You can come in tomorrow, you can open up the experiment, you can add more annotations, you can edit the existing annotations. So we can bring images into experiments. Excel, you can start with a blank worksheet using the create here, but most often you're going to bring in a worksheet that you've already got. So we can browse to it with the upload, or again I can use the drag and drop function and drag a file across from my other folder. Now it opens this Excel file in Excel. Standard Excel, everything works exactly as normal. And then we select the cells that I'd like to have displayed within the experiment. And I close Excel. So then when you close Excel, the file is copied across to our server and those selected cells are displayed within the experiment. And of course we index the content. You can come to any Excel section, your own or your colleagues, and you can download that Excel file. And of course it's the entire file, not just the cells that you see here. You can also click the edit button, or even more simply just double click on the cells and it will open the Excel file, and it's opening it from our server, so not from your hard disk or shared drive, but from the experiment stored on our server. And as you see, it's not just the cells I selected, it's the entire Excel file. There can be data on other worksheets as well. Now, if you're still working on this experiment, you haven't signed it off yet as being complete, then you can edit this data just like you edit any other data within the experiment, and the data is updated. You can select a larger number of cells this time. You can also make multiple selections even over different worksheets by using the control select within Excel. Close Excel, save the changes, and the modified data comes back into the experiment. There's a Word section which works very similarly, so I'm not going to show it to you. You can test that one out for yourselves. I will show you the PDF section. I think PDF is a very useful section because it enables you to add all sorts of data to an experiment. Output from instruments, output from other programs, PowerPoint saved as a PDF, as well of course as publications. So again, I could drag and drop, but this time I'll use the upload and I'll browse to a PDF document on my computer. The file comes into the experiment. So here we see the PDF document displayed within the experiment. We're indexing the content as long as it's text within the PDF and not just an image. And of course you can download the entire PDF document from the experiment. Now this PDF document only had one page, so it came in directly. If the PDF has several pages, it will give you a window where you can select which pages to have displayed. The entire document is there for download, but maybe you don't need to have everything visible within the experiment. And then the last section I'm going to show you here is the file attachment section. And here you can attach whatever sorts of file you like. It can be raw data files. They can be PDFs that you don't need to have visible. They can be other supporting data. Even short videos, high resolution images, whatever. We can drag and drop, or we can browse. This time we'll browse again. I'll just choose some small files, well, so they don't take too long to be uploaded. And these files are copied across to our server and stored within the experiment. So here the files are now stored in the experiment. You don't see the content here. We do index the content if they're text files, so Office, so Word, Word, Excel and PowerPoint, also PDF documents and TXT text files. We do index the content for searching. You can always then download the experiment directly, the file directly from the experiment. Sometimes the edit button becomes active for Office files, which enables you to open the file, make some changes and save it back directly rather than having to download it and upload it again. So you can see how we can add different sorts of data to our experiments. This isn't such a realistic experiment, but you can see how we can add different sorts of data. And at any time you can just close your experiment, come back to your home page, and here you see the experiment on your home page. You can open it and keep working on it. So you can work on the same computer, but of course you can move off to another computer from the office out to the lab, or even back at home you can work on your experiments. So we can reopen the experiment. There are a few other sections which I'm going to show you. I tend to add metadata and things at the top of my experiment, but you can add these sections anywhere. One section is the related experiment section, where you can link an experiment to another experiment. If I click in here, it will list other experiments that I've been looking at recently, my own experiments and other people's. If you don't see the experiment there, you can also start to type a word or two which are in the experiment title, and it will filter the list down. And here I can choose an experiment that I want to link to. Close this, and now this becomes a clickable link. If I click on there, then the other experiment opens. So these experiments are now linked to each other, and they're linked in both directions. Another section that you might want to add is this text field section. It's a single line of text. Sometimes you don't need the full text section. You might just need a small single line. Maybe for some keywords, maybe for some sample ID. So for example, I can have a plasmid ID, and I can put in the identifier, and I only need the single line of text. Okay, so we can build up this experiment, but at some stage we're going to say, I've finished the experiment, I've added all of my experimental data, I want to sign it and lock it. And you do that by going to the submission button at the top. So I press the submission button. It lists the sections, and you can actually select some of the sections rather than all of the sections. But I think 99% of the time we're going to take all of the sections. So we just click on next. And then what the software does is it generates an archive quality PDF document for the experiment. So that's your legal copy of the experiment. If you need to be able to see this experiment in 50 years time, then these PDFs should still be readable. And of course, if you need to go to court to prove inventorship, you can take these PDFs and their digital signatures. You don't need our software to do that. So here is the PDF document, and you can see that it looks pretty much the same as the experiment did within the notebook itself. Now, when you set up your projects in the administration tool, you can choose if you want to have your experiments signed by a witness. Now, I've chosen a project which needs witnessing, so I need to select my witness by clicking in the co-signer box. Here again, it lists people I've used recently. If my colleague isn't in the list, I can always click on all, and then it will list all of the members of the project. So I choose my witness. I can add some comments. Please check my Excel data. And then I sign the experiment with my password. And that's adding an electronic signature, a digital signature to the PDF document. So now we have the PDF with its first signature. If I close this, I go back to the experiment, you see that there's a line coming down the left hand side to show me that all of these sections are locked. I can download from here. I can double click and open Excel, but it will be read only. I can copy text from here. I can copy a whole section, of course, but if I try and type in here, nothing happens. All of this is now locked. The experiment isn't dead though. You can always add additional sections to an experiment. You can always come back and add more data. I can come back tomorrow, I can come back in a year's time, it doesn't matter. I can always add additional data to an old experiment so that you can keep all of the information together in one place. These new sections, when you finish them, of course, would need to be submitted with the submission button. This was part 1 of the experiment. The new sections would become another PDF document which would be signed, and that would be part 2, etc., etc. So you can always come back and add additional data. Okay, so let's now log out and see what the witness has to do. So I just log out and log in as the witness. Now when you log in, on your home page, underneath the experiments that you're working on, you have these reminder lists, and here you see experiments that you need to sign to witness. In addition, up here at the top you have the world here with your notifications, and here you'll also see that you have an experiment to co-sign. You can also set up email reminders as well, so you can have an email every day or every week when you have experiments that you need to witness. And it doesn't matter if I click in here or click here, it's going to take me to the witnessing workflow. So I come into the witnessing workflow, and here's the PDF of the experiment, which we've already seen, and I can read that. If I need to, I can go up to the top and go to the experiment and open the experiment within the notebook. And then of course I can open Excel, I can open the attached files, I can look more closely. And then as a witness I have a choice. If everything looks good, I'm going to sign the experiment. But if I see some error which needs to be corrected, I can reject the experiment. If you reject the experiment, you will need to add comments as to why, and it will go back to the author and it will be unlocked so that they can make those corrections. Now every experiment has an audit trail, so there's a record of all of this process within the audit trail, exactly as there's a record of everything else that happens to an experiment. Everybody who reads the experiment will be recorded in the audit trail, everything that happens to the experiment. Hopefully everything's good most of the time. We click on sign, and then as the witness I add my password to add the second electronic signature to that PDF document. So that experiment has now got the two signatures, and there's no way you can go back and unlock that now. If we log out now and go back in as the first user, so we've seen how we can create an experiment, we've seen how we sign and witness the experiment. Now, an important part about an electronic lab notebook is its searchability. Now at the top here we have the Google type searching, which I'll come to in a few seconds. Just before that, it can be useful sometimes to browse. You're not quite sure what you're searching for, or it just can be quicker to browse. So on the left of your home page under My Notebook, you have all of your experiments, me as author. And these lists of experiments you can sort using clicking on the header, just as you do in other applications. And you can also filter them using these filter tools. So for example, I can filter on a particular project. So if you remember, oh, I was working on that project a couple of weeks back, it may be quicker to just browse through your experiments on that particular project. In a similar way, if you go down to all notebooks, you see all of the experiments that you have permission to see. And again, I can sort them and I can filter them. And here I can also filter them by user. And that's quite useful because you may know that a particular person has done something and you can browse through that person's experiments. But yes, the Google is more powerful, so we can come up here and we can do some searching. So I can search for some text, protein and enzyme, click on the magnifying glass, and it's going to go off and find all of the experiments which I have permission to see, which contain both of those words anywhere within the experiment. In the text, in the Excel, in the PDFs, in the attached files, anywhere within the experiment. As standard is an AND operator. You can type other operators. You can put wildcards at the end of words, so you can put a star at the end of a word. So these are the hits. Now whenever you have a search, or even when we were browsing, which we did with the all experiments and my experiments, whenever you have these lists of experiments, you do actually have a choice of view. If you go up to the top right here, there's a compact view. If you're on a tablet, this is a better view. But if you're doing searching, then I think the most useful view is the content preview. Because here then you can see the content of an experiment without having to open it up in a separate tab. If you click on the experiment title, it will open up a new tab. If you just click somewhere else nearby, then you can see the experiment here in this right hand window. So we can scroll down through this list and say, okay, this experiment looks interesting. Click somewhere here and quickly browse the experiment. There is advanced searching as well. You can search as well as the text. It would be this text and an author maybe, and some text in the title and a project. So you can focus your searching that way. You can also save your searches. If you do save your searches, they'll be over here. So here's my protein and enzyme search. I can click it and run it. It reruns the search. It's not storing the hits, it's storing the search. So you can have a search that you come in every morning, every week, maybe every Monday morning you come in and run the search to see what's new for those criteria. Okay, so we can create experiments, we can search and find experiments. There are a couple of time-saving features built into the notebook. One of these is that you can take any experiment and clone it. You can clone your own experiments, you can clone your colleagues' experiments. So if you're doing something similar to something that you've done before, it can save time to do the cloning. So let me just go and find an experiment. So I'll go back to Neil Bohr's experiments, open this one. This is not my experiment. You see, I can't edit it. There are techniques to let other people edit your experiments, but that will be in a separate video. So this is the experiment I want to clone. I go to the cogwheel here at the top of the experiment and I go save as another experiment. Clone the experiment. Click the clone button and the new experiment is created. It's got a new number, it's got me as the author now, it's got the new date and time, but everything else is the same. And of course I can edit this, I can delete this text, I can add some new text, I can add new sections, I can delete some of the sections, but I can save time by reusing this old experiment. You do have to be very careful. It's quite easy to forget to change something and leave some of the old data in the new experiment. But that enables you to reuse an entire experiment. In addition, you can also save sections to use again and again. So for example, if I was always using this formulation, I might want to save this Excel sheet so that I can add it to different experiments. I select the section, go to the cogwheel for the section, this is a section thing, and I can save it to my sections. Now on the left hand side, underneath the standard section toolbox, you have this My Section toolbox. So these are the sections which I've saved. These are sections which have got content, and when I add them to the experiment in exactly the same way as normal sections, they come in, but they'll come in already populated with some content. So click on the plus, the section will come in, but you see as it comes in, it's got the title already there, it's got some content. Of course I can open up this Excel and I can modify this, change the data, select the cells, close Excel. But you can save time. Things which you use frequently, you can store them in My Sections. It may be that you're just storing a section with a title so that you don't have to keep going in and changing the section title. Okay, so the modified data came back into the experiment. So those are just a couple of time-saving features within the notebook. Let's go back to the home page, the home button. So there's just the one thing left to look at now, which is the use of templates within the notebook. Now, if you remember some minutes ago, when I started the new experiment, I said we can go with a blank experiment or we can go with a template. Now, there are two sorts of templates. Templates which are just for yourself, personal templates, and then templates which you can share with your colleagues, public templates. Now, different ways of creating a template. You can always go to an experiment and save it as a template. So just where we did the cloning, if I open an experiment, just where we did the cloning with the cogwheel and save as, you can, as well as saving as another experiment, you can save as a template. So that's one way of creating a template. But probably most of the time we're going to build up a template from scratch. So we go to the cogwheel at the top and we go new template. Now we choose whether it's a personal template or a public template. I always start with a personal template because we can turn it into a public template later when we're completely happy with the template. So we give it a name. We give it a description, and then we create the template. So the new template is created, and the good thing is if you know how to create experiments, then you know how to create templates, because we're just going to add the sections in the usual way using the same tools as we did with the experiments. And because it's so similar, we have this yellow round the box here to show you that you're working on a template and not an experiment. So we're just going to build up the template in the usual way. So we can have the aims, and these sections, they don't have to be empty, of course, they can have some content. We can have another text section with the method. I can even add a section here from my sections. I've got a plate map here I can add. So, you can have Excel sheets which have already got some calculations and something already in them. I'm sure you've already got the Excel sheets that you're using regularly to record experimental data. Can add another section here with the results, and probably a file attachment section for some raw data files. If I go up to the top, I might want to add a text field section for the plate ID. One section that you can use in templates which you don't use in experiments is this user-defined reference section. So if I add this section, this is for creating your own drop-down lists. So for example, I can have plate size. If I click on this little thing here at the right, I can put in the different values. So I can have 96. I can have other values. I can have 16. I can have 12 or whatever. And then when people create experiments from this template, they can choose from those values. It can be keywords, it can be anywhere where you want a controlled vocabulary. Let's go back to the home page and start the new experiment. Here's the template. I choose the template I want to use. Create the experiment from the template with the button at the top. And now the new experiment is created, and you see that it's got all of those sections already in place. So the structure's already there, and So we're saving time and we're getting a more unified structure. We're suggesting what data should come into the experiment. And with this plate size, if I click in here, here are the choices. I can select the choice I want to use. Okay, so saved a lot of time, very powerful. Now you can always go back to your templates. You find your own templates here under My Notebook, Personal Templates. So these are my templates, and I can click on it and edit it and keep working on it, refining it. And you'll find your public templates down here under All Notebooks with the public templates. So we can always go back to the template, we can edit it, we can put in some more details. So I can also pre-populate the results section, for example. And then when you're happy with it and you want to make it available to your colleagues, you go to the cogwheel, save as a public template. You can change the name of it if you wish, and then that's created the public template. Now with the notebook on the cloud, there's one important thing to know. A public template will not be visible to anybody else unless it has a project. Projects are used on the cloud to control who sees what. So you will need to put in at least one project so that other people can see and use this template. Okay. So that's the use of templates within the notebook. There are some features where you can make sections required, that they can't be deleted, and various other aspects, but those will be in a different video. So I hope I've shown you most of the features of how to use the BIOVIA Notebook, how easy it is to use, fairly self-explanatory, but also is a very powerful lab notebook. Thank you.